Right, hello and welcome to Year 13 Psychology. I've set you this assignment to last for the 2 weeks that I'm on my holiday in Greece. Sorry if that's making you very jealous because you've just gone back to college. But because of the way things have worked out, I've only just kind of got this job and I'd already booked my holiday in Greece. So, that's the way it is. Right, this is your assignment to last for all the lessons you would have during the weeks of 12th to 26th of September. There is a worksheet to go with this particular unit of work, which I would like you to fill in as you go along. Now, I'm not going to read out every single part of this PowerPoint because you can read it yourself. You can pause this recording at any time you want and read the instructions. I'm going to talk you through it just so that if there's anything you don't understand, hopefully I will cover it in my narration if it's not on the PowerPoint. So this covers topic 5 on the Edexcel A-level psychology spec, which is clinical psychology. As you will see on the worksheet and on the next slide, it satisfies criteria for some of the points in topic 5 of the spec. So it's very important that you fill in the worksheet completely. We will be doing some feedback on the first lesson back after this 2-week period, but it's very much up to you to get on and do this now. Obviously, you're year 13, you're very much responsible for your own learning, and this is for you to get on with, and I think you'll find it really interesting. Actually, it's a really interesting topic. So the tasks you'll be given on this assignment consist of a range of activities. You'll be researching, giving examples, answering questions, taking part in some analysis and reflection. So, this always does this when I use this format of recording. So, sorry about that. We jumped forward a bit there. Bear with me. I haven't done this for a long time. I haven't done this since the last lockdown. So you can imagine how long ago that was. There we are. That was Del Boy from Only Fools and Horses was supposed to appear rather than Zayn Malik, who will appear later on. So, how does it link to the Edexcel spec? Well, I don't know whether you've looked at your Edexcel spec. Let's face it, it's not riveting reading, but obviously these are important points for your A-level. This is topic 5, clinical psychology. This is a topic overview, which you can read at your own time, in your own pace. And this yellow arrow tells you what we'll be doing for this assignment. So there are key questions, there's a practical investigation, and also 5.6, which I haven't shown you because there's a lot on there. It will touch on some of the issues and debates in psychology that you need to write about as well. Right, so you might want to pause the video here and read through this slide. It's absolutely up to you. Now, as you'll see on your worksheet, the key questions and practical investigation that you'll be doing are all on clinical psychology. Clinical psychology, if you don't know what it means yet, is all about looking at abnormal or disordered behaviour. Fascinating topic. There's an awful lot of literature, TV programmes, film, poems, songs about, it's about mental health basically. It's about behaviours, feelings, and ways of experiencing existence that would not be considered to be everyday or normal in inverted commas. So the first task is, what does society define as normal and abnormal behaviour? Now, at the time of recording this PowerPoint, I am not aware of I don't have a copy of your textbook because I haven't taught Edexcel before. I've taught a lot of IB and a lot of AQA psychology, so I don't actually have a copy of your textbook. But obviously you will. Please use it if you need to. This topic that we're doing at the moment, it's not kind of textbook bound. It's more for you to be reflecting yourself and thinking about, your own views and your own reflections on this topic, which will be very useful when you do your extended response question. So you can look beyond your textbook. There's a wealth of resources online. Not all of them are reliable, so do be aware that when you're using online sources, They may not be 100% reliable. Wikipedia, for example, I wouldn't use as an online source simply because anybody can go in at any time and change it. So, but what I want you to do is provide 3 examples of behaviors, lifestyle choices, ways of seeing the world, if you like, that were previously considered to be abnormal. So in other words, they marked someone out as being insane, and maybe legally and, officially insane. So I'm talking about behaviors that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, go back as far as you like in history, the world's your oyster, go for it, that now people just think of as being, well, what's the big deal? It's normal, isn't it? Whereas in the past, they were considered to be marks of insanity, and certainly abnormal or warped behaviour. Now, I've given you an example with these 3 photographs here. Please feel free to use this example or use another one. Now, I wonder if you know who these people are. This is Oscar Wilde, a famous playwright, poet, extremely witty, clever person who ended up in Reading jail for acts of homosexuality, and was persecuted and would have been considered insane because he was homosexual. This person probably won the war for Britain and the Allies, and his name is Alan Turing. If you've seen Enigma, if you've seen anything about the Enigma machine, Bletchley Park, which isn't very far from here, Bletchley Park is in Milton Keynes. Alan Turing designed the Enigma machine, which eventually brought down the Nazis because of it was a great code breaker. Alan Turing was homosexual as well, and after the war, he was found to be committing homosexual acts, and he was arrested, and he was put through conversion therapy. Now, conversion therapy is therapy that is intended to turn a gay person straight. So, you can imagine how successful that was. And he eventually killed himself. So this is the man who won the war for Britain, and the authorities ended up destroying him. And at the time, homosexuality was illegal in the UK. It didn't stop being illegal until 1967. Just happens to be the year of my birth, so there you are. So there's another example. This person, I'll be very impressed if you recognise her. She's called Radcliffe Hall, and she was a writer and a poet. And she published a book in the 1920s called The Well of Loneliness. And The Well of Loneliness was about lesbianism. She was a lesbian. She was what people called a cross-dresser in those days, but you would call transgender, or just basically trans these days. And her book was, she went through an obscenity trial when her book was published, and she was really kind of on the margins of society and suffered a lot of abuse because of her outspoken lesbianism. So that's one example of a behaviour that would have marked these 3 people who were pretty much geniuses of their time out as being abnormal or, insane. And actually, homosexuality was on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders until, I'm not absolutely sure off the top of my head, I want to say the 1970s. Why don't you do a bit of research? See what year homosexuality came off the DSM. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, we will be covering that in another lesson. So, find 3 examples of any behaviours that in the past, go back as far as medieval times if you like, what the heck, just go for it, that would be, at the time, people thought you were abnormal if you did or said or thought this. But today, people would just say, well, so what? What's the big deal? Okay, right. So you want to pause it here, fill in your worksheet, do your research. Brilliant, thank you. So, your reflections. You've chosen your behaviours. What I want you to do now is choose one of these behaviours from the list on the previous slide and reflect on how you feel about this behaviour being considered abnormal in the past. So if we're taking homosexuality, does it resonate with you that people would feel shocked today that homosexuality would be seen as abnormal? Can you understand why in the past there was a lot of fear and ignorance around homosexuality? Think about the role of religion in people's lives. The church was a very powerful thing in people's lives in the past. Think about how people, felt about the government, about, people in power, and conventions of the time, different social norms. So to extend your thinking, you might also include comments on how this behaviour is viewed today. Do all people, societies, cultures, groups and nations, etc. view this behaviour differently to the way you view it? If you're taking homosexuality and you look at a country such as Saudi Arabia or some of the countries in the Middle East and maybe some African countries, and actually even there are countries in Eastern Europe where homosexuality is taboo, and people, you can actually be put to death or imprisoned, or you find yourselves on the margins of society if you were trying to live a life as a homosexual. And there's a woman here, again, I'll be very impressed if you recognize her. Her name is Frances Farmer, and she was an actress in Hollywood in the golden era, the 1930s and 40s, but she was incredibly outspoken. She was very, she wouldn't let men boss her around or tell her what to do. And she was very outspoken about it and quite kind of, she had, she probably did have a bit of I think she had bipolar disorder. But at the time, the men around her particularly wanted to control her and thought she was trouble. And the studios sacked her because they wanted all their actresses and their actors to be compliant and obedient. And she kind of kicked against the system, and she ended up being committed to an insane asylum and given a lobotomy. A lobotomy, where the front part of your brain is removed in a bid to control behaviour. So that's just an example of how behaviours from the past, which people were scared of, particularly coming from women, today nobody would be treated like that. So pause here, add your reflections. The next task is the role of gender and culture in mental health diagnosis. Now, in an ideal world, everybody would be treated the same when they turn up to a medical appointment, whether it's with a traditional doctor or a therapist or a counsellor or whoever, and they would be treated the same regardless of their gender or their culture or anything else about them. Everybody would be treated the same, but we know that this is just not true. The way you look, the way you speak, the things about you that you can't control are often people judge you for them before they look at what is actually your symptoms are. I mean, I'm not saying that all doctors do that, but I think doctors are human beings and they are, prone to biases just like everybody else. So what I'd like you to do is click on this article here, read through this article. It's not very long, but it looks at how there is a gender bias in mental health diagnosis, and it particularly looks at how men are underdiagnosed for depression. And it's this idea that, women will be very quickly diagnosed as being depressed because it's kind of more in keeping with the idea that women are more emotional and will express their emotions more, and that men, shouldn't feel like that because it's not manly. So have a read through it, and then once you've read through it, just list 3 stereotypes that our society promotes about what it means to be a man. This kind of idea, for example, men, big boys don't cry, men don't cry. And I know it's a very outdated attitude, but some people do still feel like that. So if you pause the video here, read that article, and then list 3 stereotypes there. Okay, so you've listed your 3 stereotypes, you've read the article. Now you may be wondering, why have I got these photographs of celebrities down here? Stephen Fry, Ollie Murs and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, all successful people, and 2 of them particularly kind of, associated with a certain degree of being, I wouldn't say macho, but kind of, Ollie Murs is a kind of good-looking guy who is kind of popular with, I imagine, with a lot of certainly teenage girls from when he was on the X Factor. Dwayne Johnson is a great, kind of very fit and healthy and what's the word I want to use? Muscle-bound action hero from Hollywood films. But all 3 of these men have spoken about depression and spoken about their own, battles with depression. Particularly Stephen Fry, who's been very publicly honest and open about his own terrible depression. So this is just the idea that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter whether you're white or black or rich or poor, young, old, what nationality you are, the males, females, whoever, everybody is prone to depression, and that, this is something that should be diagnosed regardless of what you look like, what you sound like, and those other factors. Okay, so again, your reflections. Choose one of the behaviours that you listed on the previous slide. Reflect on how you feel about this behaviour being linked to what it means to be male. For example, men don't cry. Is that a valid viewpoint to have? What does that mean if you're a man and you feel that you want to cry, but you think you'll be judged for it and people will think you're soppy, or they'll say to you, what's wrong with you? Men don't go on like that. Or if you're female and you feel that you want to be supportive to men, and or that maybe you're female and you don't cry very often. Do you feel, if you're a female, that too much pressure is put on females to be sensitive and emotional? And also, the discussion on male and female, is that outdated anyway? I mean, we live in a society that is increasingly fluid in terms of gender. Is it even right or useful to distinguish between male and female when it comes to determining the state of someone's mental health? And again, as you'll probably see, there's Zayn Malik, who has been very open again about his depression and anxiety, and has been very brave in coming forward and talking about it. So pause the video here and then add your reflections on this issue. Okay, the task number 3 is the role of culture in mental health diagnosis. So have a look at the document that's been included in this work folder. It's called Culture-Bound Syndromes. This document outlines the way in which different cultures view mental illnesses and explanations given per culture for the symptoms shown by someone. For example, in Korea, South Korea, the concept of Shin-Byung syndrome is characterized by anxiety and physical conditions such as weakness, dizziness, fear, loss of appetite, insomnia. Now, if you went to a regular kind of Western medicine doctor for this, like your GP is what I mean, if you went to your GP with these symptoms, he or she might say, oh, maybe there's some anxiety here, maybe you are, you're clearly depressed, I'll prescribe you some antibiotics and maybe some, talking therapy. So, but these symptoms are explained in the diagnosis in Korea that the person suffering them has been possessed by ancestral spirits or ghosts of their dead relatives. So this is a traditional way of diagnosing these symptoms in South Korea. So think about that mismatch between what you might call straightforward Western hospital / doctor / your GP surgery diagnosis and medicines and therapy, and what other cultures, how they might explain these symptoms. So look through the list of culture-bound syndromes, choose your 2 favourite, list 2 of them outlined on the document, and for each one reflect on how a modern 21st century doctor in the UK might view each of them. So if, for example, would a doctor agree that someone had been possessed by spirits from the past? Well, spoiler alert, no, they wouldn't. They might, even if they privately thought, yes, I agree with that, I can understand that, they are not going to diagnose someone as having Shin-Byung, which is, to be possessed by ghosts of your dead relatives. Just not going to happen with a regular GP in a UK surgery. So why not? Why wouldn't a doctor, if a Korean person said, I think this is what's happening to me, why wouldn't a doctor consider that as a valid diagnosis? I mean, the answer to that is fairly obvious, but I really want you to think about this in some depth and think about, how we value medicine and diagnosis, not of physical symptoms, but of mental health symptoms. And is one superior just because you end up with a prescription for tablets? And maybe, if you then visited a shaman or somebody who could help the dead spirits leave your system and you got better, well, isn't that okay as well? As long as the person gets better, does it matter about the journey that they take there. I just find this stuff so interesting. You can probably tell. Anyway, let's move on. So if you pause the video here, and you can add your reflections. Okay, so we've done our key questions, and now it's time for you to take part in a practical investigation. Now, I know by looking at the Edexcel syllabus that you do lots of these practical investigations, and then these are then holistically linked to other aspects of the spec. So this shouldn't be too different for you. So, pardon me. Choose one, or just one, don't do 2 or 3 of them, just choose one of these discussion points. To what extent have attitudes towards mental health changed over time? So that kind of looked at the first point, that when we looked at homosexuality, for example. To what extent does gender influence mental health diagnosis? And again, you could look at this from the viewpoint of male, female, trans, whatever. It doesn't have to be the whole idea of men having to be macho. It's entirely up to you what you do. To what extent should culture be considered by doctors when diagnosing mental health disorders or conditions? So again, that's what we've just looked at with the culture-bound syndromes. And again, you approach this any way you like. This whole discussion it's a discussion. So it's up to you how you go about it. So once you've chosen one of the above discussion points, carry out the following tasks on the next slide. So task 4A, task 4 is divided into 2 sections. So 4A, find at least 2 sources. Now a source is simply something that you find that provides you the stimulus or information that you need. So for example, a textbook is a source, a website is a source. So find 2 sources, but please don't use a textbook for this activity. This is not a textbook researchy type activity. This is where you go out into the real world and find real sources. Find at least 2 sources which explore the topic you have chosen. For example, news articles, blogs, posts, interviews, opinion pieces, podcasts. So find at least 2 that really interest you. Don't choose just the first 2 you find if they bore you rigid and you think, oh, this is so dull. Choose the sources that you think, wow, this is so interesting, and this really sparks my curiosity. So for each source, so let's say you've chosen, I don't know, a radio interview and a blog. So for each source, analyse them using the following questions. What attitude or approach does this source take towards the topic? Is it sympathetic? Is it challenging? I mean, a challenging source could be saying, well, conventional Western medicine is not enough to tackle mental illness. We need something that is more linked to people's cultural beliefs, or we need more a more open-minded approach. So it doesn't so try not to use sources that are just factual. You want something in there that is really a discussion, a proper discussion of the topic. It could be opinionated, it could be balanced, it could be humorous, it could be serious. So what key aspects of mental health diagnosis are covered in the article, and why do you think the writer or presenter has chosen to feature them? A couple of years ago, I saw a documentary by a presenter. He does a lot of sports presenting, Adrian Childs. I don't know if you've heard of him. But he was looking at his own alcoholism. He says he's not an alcoholic, but he's very close to being one. And he linked it to his depression as well. And it was very interesting because he went and spoke to his friends. He spoke to other people who were very similar, very dependent on alcohol and also experienced depression. And he spoke to his parents, and his parents were very dismissive, saying depression doesn't exist, you just need to snap out of it. So, it's from the perspective there, his approach was, why do I have depression? What could it be linked to? Do other people feel like me? And it was incredibly interesting. You might be able to find it on YouTube or on the iPlayer or something if it's still there. It may not be, but it was very, very interesting. So thirdly, is there anything in the source that concerns you? For example, is the writer or presenter too flippant? Are they going, I've got depression, doesn't matter, it's a bit of a joke really, oh, it doesn't really, which clearly if you have depression, you wouldn't be joking about it all the time. It would be something that was, a serious, something in your life that was serious. Are they too serious about it, do you feel? Do they go into it in a way that you can relate to? have they made you think of things in a different way? Can you detect any bias in the presentation of it? So does the person just seem to be rigidly sticking to one viewpoint and not moving from that viewpoint? Because obviously bias is something in psychology that we look at and we think about as an evaluation point. So have a look at that. Does the source tend to reinforce stereotypes or discrimination? So, if it's an article on depression, it only talks about women being depressed, then that is reinforcing the stereotype that, oh, women are so emotional and they're so, they get depressed easily and it's a woman's condition, depression. So that will be interesting for you. So that's a bit of kind of higher level thinking there where you really are looking for bias. And I've just got some ideas here that I found just from doing a quick internet search. There's lots out there. You won't be short of sources. Okay, so that's some research for you to do and analysis. So you'll need to pause the video here to get on with that. Right, now the second part of task 4 is content analysis. This is the practical investigation kind of part 2, where you start to use something that psychologists would use when they've done what you do. So content analysis is a method used to analyse qualitative data, so data in the form of words. In its most common form, it's a technique that allows a researcher to take qualitative data and to transform it into quantitative data, numbers. Because qualitative data takes a long time to analyse. Numerical data is quick to analyse. You can get a clear overview. It's just there in front of you. You can't really argue with the numbers. So the technique can be used for data in many different formats. For example, interview transcripts, film and audio recordings. The researcher conducting a content analysis will use coding units in their work. These sound more technical than they are. When I explain what this is, you'll understand that it's not that difficult. These units vary widely depending on the data used, but an example would be the number of positive or negative words used by a mother to describe her child's behaviour, or the number of swear words in a film. So you can see how it sounds a bit technical, coding units. It's not. It's just saying, oh, I've counted so many swear words in this film. That's it. It's as easy as that. Now you can see the procedure here. You collect the data, you have a look through it, you familiarise yourself with it, you identify your coding units, you then analyse them, which really is saying how many of this have we got, how many of this have we got, how many of this have we got, and you make a tally. It's quite straightforward actually. It's a nice simple way of doing it. So here's what you need to do. So you've already collected your data. This is what you did for task 4A. They were your 2 sources. You've already read through and analysed it. You did that for task 4A. So done, dusted, in the bag. Now you have to determine at least 3 coding units and apply them to the sources you've collected. Now what you must do at this point is pause this video and watch this video here. It's a very short video. It's only about just over a minute. And that gives you specific instructions as to how to identify and use a coding system to turn your qualitative data into quantitative data. If you skip this bit, you might get a little bit lost when you come to do it. As I say, it's not difficult, but just make sure that you know exactly what you're doing so you don't get stuck halfway through. So having watched this video, you can now state below what your coding units are. For example, they might include items such as behaviour once seen as abnormal but is now seen as normal. So that might be like men wearing bright colours or men being physically affectionate or something. Yeah, in the past that might have been, abnormal behaviour, but now it's no big deal. So you would tally that. You would make a little tally of it. A tally is just like here. Every time the behaviour is observed, 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes, 4 strikes, and you just put that kind of farm gate bar across when you get to number 5, just so it's easier to count up than having about 27 different, whatever these are, 1 bar, figure 1s going across a page. You can go 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. So, and others might be women seen as being emotional or cultural ideas not taken seriously. Or sorry, that should be seriously by medical profession. But you get the gist. So that you then go through your sources and make a tally of each time something in each source highlights one of your coding units. So do this across your sources. Don't make separate tallies for each source. So if you've got 2 sources, you use your coding units across, pardon me, so not each, so that you only end up with a total tally for both sources. So once you've finished doing this, you'll be able to see which of your coding units features most in your sources. So record your results below. So coding unit behaviour, once seen as abnormal but now seen as normal, you might have a total tally of 15 across your two sources. So you can see which codes, which themes are coming up more commonly than others. And this is what psychologists do when they analyse data. You're doing exactly what a psychologist would do. And your final task, having completed this entire assignment, answer the following questions. What do you now understand or know about mental health diagnosis that you weren't previously aware of? In what ways has this assignment been useful to you both as a psychology student and a person? So when I say as a person, you when you're not studying psychology, do you find that knowing about mental health diagnosis and the different biases and the different difficulties people may go through could be helpful for you in your own life? I mean, if the answer to that is it hasn't been helpful at all, then fair enough. But think about, project into the future and think about a time in your life when it might be useful for you. So are there any topics in clinical psychology that you are excited to study or that you want to learn more about? Please explain what it is about these topics that excites or interests you. That's just, from my own curiosity, really, wondering what what you're looking forward to. So that is the end of this assignment. And I said I've designed this to easily stretch across the 2 weeks when I won't see you. So once I get back, the plan at the moment, it may change between now and then, because obviously I'm doing this before I've even met anybody at your school or know anything very much about what you've already done. The plan is to pick up at topic 5 and start from the beginning with topic 5 on clinical psychology. We will spend part of the first lesson back looking at this assignment, and I will expect me to put you on the spot and say, so task number 4, task number 3, what did you think about this? And if you say, oh, I don't know, I haven't done it, well, you're in year 13 now, so I would expect everybody who's made it to year 13 is really keen to do well and to, be in charge of their own learning like an adult does and to do it. So it's going to be a little bit embarrassing for you if you haven't done any of it. Okay, so let's end on a positive note. Looking forward to seeing you and to getting to grips with this topic, getting our teeth into it, and to coming back from my holiday and getting on with this work on clinical psychology. Bye for now.